This is my older sister, and she's just a nurse.
My stepsister publicly humiliated me at her wedding, called me just a rehab girl in front of her in-laws, but she had no idea the groom's mother was the patient I saved after a stroke, the one who couldn't even walk without me. And when her mother-in-law stood up and told everyone the truth, the entire room turned on her. The laughter stopped. The respect disappeared. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 32, and I've spent most of my life learning how to be invisible. I arrived at the vineyard just as the sun dipped behind the hills of Napa Valley, painting everything in gold. My old sedan looked painfully out of place among the sleek black cars and polished SUVs lining the entrance. I stepped out, smoothing my simple navy dress, no designer label, no sparkle. Just clean, practical like me. Chloe Harper, my stepsister, would have hated it. Chloe is 28, tall and striking with long blonde hair that falls in perfect waves, like she just stepped out of a magazine. She has that effortless confidence people mistake for charm, but I know better. Growing up, she learned that attention was power, and she used it well, especially on people like me. I tightened my grip on the small gift box in my hand as I walked toward the entrance. My phone buzzed. "Thank you for helping me walk again, Sarah. I took my first hike today." It was from Mrs. Thompson, late 50s, gentle voice, silver-streaked hair, and the kind of quiet resilience that only comes from surviving something life-altering. I smiled softly, my chest warming in a way no wedding ever could. Then I stepped inside. Crystal chandeliers glowed above rows of perfectly dressed guests. Laughter echoed. Champagne flowed. Everything was flawless. Too flawless. Excuse me, staff entrance is around the back. I turned. A waiter, young, maybe early 20s, slim build, nervous eyes, gestured politely but firmly toward a side door. For a second, I just stared at him. Then I smiled. "No, I'm a guest." He blinked, embarrassed, stepping aside quickly. "Oh, sorry." I nodded and moved past him, already shrinking again. Some things never change. Across the room, I spotted Chloe radiant in white, surrounded by people who mattered. And me, I slipped into the background, exactly where I was expected to be. The music and laughter from the reception faded into the background as I stood near the edge of the hall, watching Chloe spin gracefully among her guests. And just like that, the past came rushing back, 2 lives under one roof, moving in completely different directions. I was 16 when my mother, Linda Mitchell, remarried. Linda, early 50s now, soft-spoken, with tired but kind eyes, had spent years raising me alone after my father passed. Loss made her gentle, almost too forgiving. "Don't fight for attention, Sarah," she used to say. "Just live a good life. That's enough." Chloe, on the other hand, grew up in abundance. Her father, Richard Harper, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 60s with a commanding presence and a habit of measuring people by success, made sure she had everything. Private schools, designer dresses, summer trips to Europe. Chloe never had to ask twice, and she never learned to hear no. I still remember the night of my senior prom. I stood in front of the mirror in my small bedroom wearing a borrowed dress that didn't quite fit. Then my phone rang. My shift manager at the diner, Tom, a middle-aged man with a rough voice but a fair heart, needed someone to cover an extra shift. I said yes before he even finished asking. That night, while Chloe danced under chandeliers, I carried plates and refilled coffee cups. Weeks later, I overheard Chloe laughing with her friends in the living room. "My stepsister?" she said, her voice light but sharp. "She wants to be a physical therapist, basically a glorified assistant." The girls laughed. I stood in the hallway, invisible again, but I never stopped. Every late shift, every missed moment, every quiet sacrifice, it all led me somewhere. Just not somewhere Chloe would ever understand. And standing there now, watching her perfect world unfold, I realized something hadn't changed. We didn't just grow up differently. We learned to value completely different things. The dinner had just begun when Chloe suddenly stood up, the soft clink of her glass cutting through the music. Conversations faded as all eyes turned toward her. She smiled brightly, the kind of smile that always meant someone was about to become entertainment. "I want you all to meet someone," she said, her tone playful but sharp. Then her eyes landed on me. "Sarah, come here." My steps felt heavier than they should as I walked toward the main table. Daniel Thompson, the groom, early 30s, tall, neatly styled dark hair, with a calm and grounded presence, watched me with polite curiosity. He seemed kind, the type who listened more than he spoke. Beside him sat his mother, elegant and composed, her posture almost too careful, like movement required effort. Chloe placed her hand on my shoulder. "This is my stepsister," she announced, and pausing just enough to build attention. Then she laughed lightly. "She's just a nurse." The word just hung in the air. A few people chuckled. Not loudly, but enough. To my left, a woman in her 40s with sharp features and expensive jewelry leaned toward her companion. "A nurse?" she whispered, barely lowering her voice. "That's sweet." The man beside her smirked. "Long hours, low pay," he added casually. Then I spotted Madison Blake, Chloe's best friend. Late 20s, striking, always chasing attention. Her phone was angled just right, the red light blinking, live streaming. Her lips curved slightly as she zoomed in on my face. For a second, I wasn't here anymore. I was 17, standing outside the living room, listening to Chloe laugh about me again. I felt it, the same heat, the same silence pressing against my chest, but I didn't react. I smiled, because I had learned something Chloe never did. Dignity doesn't need an audience. The laughter faded, conversations resumed. The moment passed for everyone else, but not for me. I stepped back quietly, returning to the edge of the room. Still invisible, still underestimated. I had barely returned to my seat when I felt it, that quiet, persistent gaze. Across the table, Mrs. Eleanor Thompson was watching me. She sat with perfect posture, her silver-streaked hair swept neatly into a low bun, her pale blue dress elegant but understated, late 50s, maybe early 60s. There was a calm strength in her presence, but also something fragile, like someone who had fought a battle not long ago. Her hands rested lightly on the table, fingers slightly tense, as if they remembered weakness. She didn't smile. She studied me. Daniel noticed it too. "Mom?" he asked softly, leaning closer. "You okay?" Daniel Thompson, calm, composed, the kind of man who carried responsibility naturally, but there was a flicker of protectiveness in his eyes when he looked at her. I remembered hearing whispers earlier how worried he had been months ago, how doctors weren't sure if she would walk normally again. "I'm fine," Mrs. Thompson replied, though her voice carried distraction. Her eyes never left me, and then it hit me. I knew her. Not like this, not in silken soft lighting, but in a hospital room filled with silence and fear. My chest tightened slightly. I looked down at my hands, unsure. Did she recognize me? Should I say something? No, this wasn't my moment. Across the table, Chloe let out a small laugh, waving her hand dismissively. "Don't mind Sarah," she said lightly. "She spends most of her time in clinics anyway." A few guests smiled politely, but the energy had shifted subtly, quietly, because Mrs. Thompson didn't laugh. She leaned back slightly, still watching me, her brows pulling together just a little. Not judgment, not confusion, recognition, trying to surface. For a second, our eyes met, and in that brief moment, I saw it something flicker behind hers, like a memory, just out of reach. And I looked away first, because I wasn't sure what would happen if she remembered. The music softened as guests returned to their seats, but the air around our table felt different, tighter, expectant. Mrs. Eleanor Thompson leaned forward slightly, her eyes fixed on me with growing certainty. "Excuse me," she said, her voice calm but deliberate. "May I ask, where do you work?" I hesitated for a fraction of a second. "St. Mary's Hospital," I replied. Something shifted instantly. Her breath caught. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "St. Mary's," she repeated softly, as if unlocking something buried deep. Daniel turned toward her, concern flickering across his face. "Mom?" But she didn't look at him. She looked at me. 3 years ago," she continued slowly, "I had a stroke. I couldn't move my left side. I couldn't even stand." The table fell silent. Conversations nearby began to fade as people leaned in, and then I remembered too. The sterile smell of the hospital, the dim lights of the recovery room, the long, exhausting nights. "You were there," she said, her voice trembling now, not with weakness but emotion. "You stayed with me every day." A flash of memory hit me, Mrs. Thompson sitting at the edge of the hospital bed, her hands shaking as she tried to stand, me beside her counting softly. "1 step. That's it. You're doing it." Hours turning into weeks, weeks into months. I almost gave up, she admitted quietly. But you didn't let me. I swallowed, my throat tight. I was just doing my job. But she shook her head firmly. No, you stayed after your shifts ended. I remember asking why. Her eyes softened. You said, because you're not done yet. Daniel stared at me now, disbelief written all over his face. I tried to find you after I recovered, Mrs. Thompson continued, but they told me you had transferred departments. I never got the chance to thank you. The silence around us deepened, and for the first time that night, I wasn't invisible anymore. Mrs. Thompson slowly pushed her chair back and stood up. The movement was careful, deliberate but strong, stronger than anyone at that table expected. The soft music in the background seemed to fade as her voice carried across the room. Everyone, she said, calm but firm, I need to say something. Nearby conversations stopped. She turned slightly, her gaze sweeping across the guests before settling on me again. 3 years ago, I couldn't walk. I couldn't even stand without help. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Doctors weren't sure I would fully recover. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. But this woman, she gestured toward me, never gave up on me. Now all eyes were on me, but she stayed with me when others left. She encouraged me when I wanted to quit. She gave me back something I thought I had lost forever, my independence. Her voice softened, but it didn't weaken. Sarah didn't just do her job, she changed my life. The whispers grew louder. At a nearby table, Dr. Alan Brooks, a man in his mid-40s with glasses, neatly combed hair, and the composed confidence of someone used to being respected, leaned forward. She's right, he added, his voice measured but clear. Recovery like that doesn't happen without exceptional care. Nurses like her are the backbone of the system. That changed everything. People who had laughed earlier now looked uncomfortable. Some avoided eye contact, others nodded slowly as if trying to correct their first impression. Across the room, Madison's live stream continued, but now her expression had shifted. Her confident smile was gone, replaced by tension as comments flooded in faster than she could read. The tone had changed, dramatically. Chloe stood frozen. Her perfect night, carefully built, carefully controlled, was slipping. Not because someone attacked her, but because the truth had finally spoken. And no one was laughing anymore. The music returned, softer now, almost cautious, as if the room itself was trying to recover from what had just happened. Conversations resumed, but the energy had shifted permanently. I stepped away from the table, needing air, needing space. Sarah, wait. I turned. Chloe stood a few feet behind me, her posture no longer flawless. Her shoulders were tense, her perfect smile gone. Up close, I noticed the small cracks, her eyes slightly red, her expression uncertain. For the first time in my life, Chloe Harper didn't look untouchable. Can we talk? She asked quietly. We stepped outside onto the terrace. The cool Napa night wrapped around us, the distant lights of the vineyard stretching endlessly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she exhaled. I'm sorry. The words felt unfamiliar coming from her. I didn't think... She continued, her voice unsteady. I didn't think it would go that far. She let out a small, humorless laugh. I just wanted everything to be perfect tonight. I studied her. Perfect for who? She hesitated. For everyone, for them, for me. Her hands tightened slightly. Growing up, it was always about appearances. Being the best, the most impressive. If I wasn't, I felt like I was nothing. That explained more than she realized. I know I've been, she struggled for the word, cruel, especially to you. I didn't interrupt. I'm sorry, Sarah. Really. I nodded slowly, but I didn't step closer. I accept your apology, I said calmly, but things don't just reset. You don't get to treat me like that and expect everything to be okay overnight. She swallowed, nodding. I'm not angry anymore, I added, but I'm not going back to being the person you could walk over either. For once, Chloe didn't argue. Behind us, the terrace door opened. Our mother, Linda, stepped out, her eyes already filled with tears. She had heard enough. She pressed a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed, watching her daughters speak honestly for the first time in years. And somehow that mattered more than everything that had happened inside. When we walked back inside, the atmosphere had changed in a way I could feel before I even saw it. Conversation softened as people noticed me, not with curiosity this time, but with something closer to respect. Not loud, not dramatic, just different. Daniel approached me first. Up close, his calm demeanor carried something deeper, now gratitude. "Sarah," he said, extending his hand, his voice steady but sincere. "I don't think a simple thank you is enough." He hesitated slightly, then added, "I run a healthcare investment group. We support rehabilitation and recovery programs. If you've ever thought about starting something of your own, I'd like to help." For a moment, I didn't answer, because for the first time, the idea didn't feel impossible. Behind him, Mrs. Thompson stepped forward, her posture stronger than before, and her eyes warm. "I would be your first supporter," she said gently. "Not as a patient this time, but as someone who believes in what you do." Her voice carried quiet certainty. "People like you deserve to be seen." That meant more than she probably realized. Nearby, a few guests nodded in agreement. Even Dr. Brooks gave me a small approving smile from across the room. I glanced at Chloe. She stood beside the dance floor, quieter now, no longer trying to command the room. But when our eyes met, she gave me a small nod. Not perfect, not polished, just real, and that was enough. Later, as I stepped outside into the cool night air again, I felt something shift inside me, not because of their recognition, but because I no longer needed it to feel whole. For years, I had lived in the background of someone else's story. Tonight, I stepped out of it, not louder, not bigger, just finally myself. So tell me something. Since when did being a nurse become something to look down on? Since when did caring for people at their weakest, staying through the longest nights, and holding lives together become just a job? Are we really that invisible, that replaceable, that useless, or is it just easier for people to judge what they don't understand? I want to hear your honest opinion. Was Chloe wrong? Or is this how society truly sees nurses today? Be real. Drop your thoughts below. I'm reading every single one.